Hello, David. Welcome to Talk Python to me. Amazing to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Talk Python has been part of my story up to this point.
Has it? Okay. Well, you are about to write the next chapter in the story, so that's pretty excellent. It's I have a sense of what's coming. We've planned out what we're going to talk about and that sort of thing, and I'm really excited about this topic. So it's going to be a good one. I think one of the real powers of the Python community and the reason the language has such staying power is there's such a diversity of use cases, technology, like technology standpoints, right? Like I build software for this group, or I build these types of apps, and it's not just like Ruby on Rails, which is has been very popular and stuff, but it's for websites, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been. I mean, web development has dominated my use of it, but my entry into it, which I suppose I'll mention in a moment, was through all those little tools.
Was it okay? Yeah. Well, let's hear it. Who are you, David Flood? Tell us, introduce yourself real quick, and tell us about how you got into it.
Yep. So my background is in music and the humanities. I mean, in 2019, I didn't know what Python was or the name of any programming language. And I've been doing textual criticism, which is, there's lots of criticisms in the academy. This is the one where if you have lots and lots of versions of the same text, you are comparing them to to work out what the initial text was and like how it changed over time. Okay, well then,
Interesting. Give us an example.
okay, so one of the famous examples, hope I can remember it off the top of my head, is from Shakespeare. We're all familiar with the line "To be or not to be, that is the question."
That is the question.
Well, there's a variant of it. There's a variant of it. One of the early copies from written by Shakespeare himself has. Somebody's going to be able to type into the chat exactly what it is. They'll know this anecdote, but it's something more like "To be or not to be, I. That's the question."
Ah,
And so, which one is the original one? Why did he change it? That's kind of one example. I work mainly in the New Testament, uh, which is especially complicated because no other corpus from ancient history has as many copies of the same text as that corpus does. So it's um, quite complicated, and our techniques have grown because of that, and perhaps
how,
become more advanced than
yeah, how
in other
interesting.
fields.
I mean, that many variations over that huge span of time, over different groups with different, maybe not intentions, but certainly colored by different worldviews and philosophies and so on. And yeah, I see the trouble.
No, yeah, and it's and they were people of the book, so copying it is something that happened a lot, and they copied the monks, like the medieval monks copied everything. They copied our Greek classics. So that's what I was interested in, and because of the wealth of data that we have, computer tools are more and more important in that field. So when I started my PhD in 2019, I knew that I wanted to use some of these cutting edge tools. Some of them may be surprising. For example, we've been using phylogenetic software. Now, this is software that evolutionary biologists are using, or computational biologists are using to track, for example, how COVID strains like mutate
Interesting.
over time.
Wow. Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
what what they're comparing are the DNA letters, and so you have the sequence of letters, and you're comparing how those change over time. Well, you can swap in textual variants for DNA letters, and now we can track how texts change over time and group them into families, things like
Yeah.
that. So,
It's like a
one
time
thing,
series, but of words or letters or something. Yeah. How
yeah,
interesting.
I mean, yeah, there's lots of important algorithms for um, comparing sequences of things. And so if we can just swap in Greek words and Greek text instead, then we can maybe apply it to textual criticism. So I was pretty interested in those things. That wasn't actually the method that brought me into it, but something like that, kind of computer intensive tools.
Yeah.
What I learned is that these tools were not like they weren't actually available to me. They weren't desktop applications, and for the most part, they weren't public web applications. They were software libraries.
I see.
So
So something
yeah,
on PyPI or something like that, right?
yeah, exactly, or Java. And I needed to glue them together. So the long story short on that is during the first year of my PhD, I was picking up Python, watching YouTube videos while I was doing the dishes. And then the pandemic hit while I was living in Edinburgh, in Scotland, probably not far from Wilmacoogan. And so the pandemic gave me the excuse to spend even a few more hours, each day, picking up these new technical skills. And so I did it. I was able to use these advanced tools in my work. But what was really important to me was sharing, like making that available to my colleagues. And so I had to move from writing these like bad top to bottom Python scripts into things that could be reused by other people, and that led me into the web because the web is where
Right.
that's how I can share with anybody.
It's the easiest way. And it's really wild how much the web is kind of the last bastion of app freedom. It's so bizarre because, I've many times told the stories of the insane battles of just getting our apps that just play back video of content that's already on the web into the app store. I mean, weeks of fighting about the weirdest, most nonsensical things with both Google and Apple. But we also now have the Mac platform and the Windows platform very aggressively looking for digital code certificates and all sorts of signing and other kinds of you can't even just send somebody an executable anymore. It won't run. It's crazy. It's down to like, okay, put it on the web, I guess.
That's right. I played the game of distributing desktop apps. That's how I did it. That's how I initially distributed things. And at this point, I just require people to install Python and then install my desktop app from PyPI because it's too hard otherwise for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I could pay for the code signing from Apple and do all of that, but it's too much work for the time that I have.
Yeah, I'm about to do another round of it. I'm working on an app, and my developer account is still active, so we might have a fresh round of fun. Hopefully, it goes smooth this time. Anyway, I do think it's such a challenge. And are you leveraging? I don't know if the timing was right. Like maybe this was too early, but these days, are you leveraging things like UVX to run, or are you just pip install this thing and then run it?
Yeah, I haven't updated the README in a while, so I think it just asks for pip. But certainly, if somebody asked me today, I would say yeah, just install this with UV.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
because then they don't even need Python. I mean,
Exactly.
and that's
If they
brilliant.
get in, and that's it is another barrier reduced in distributing these applications, right? Like if you can get UV installed on a machine, then you don't even have to say install. Just the way you run it is UVX my thing, and it's all transparent to you, right? Which is beautiful. So what
No,
was it
absolutely.
like? Yeah. So what was it like coming from what sounds like a not super screen focused, super techie aspect and having to dive into this world? And someday you're probably like, how is it that I'm publishing stuff to PyPI? What has happened to me?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I remember when I first signed up for GitHub because whatever YouTube tutorial I was working through at the time, said that that I needed to do that. Um, you know, I think it started making a lot of sense. I didn't have any technical background, but the world the world kind of open source software, it it kind of made sense. It felt like it fit really well into my academic circle.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the attitudes are similar.
I agree. I think they are actually. And I think that's a pretty neat thing. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, let's talk about what you're doing with digital humanities. You're actually at a really interesting project or organization, I guess, that does many projects, right?
Yeah. So fast forwarding, I finished my PhD in the
Yeah,
humanities.
sorry, I
Had so
cut you
much
off there, didn't
fun.
I?
No, that's
Keep
fine. That's
going.
fine. Had so much fun writing like these tools, and then just solving the distribution problem to share them with other scholars. That was so fun that I was open to this kind of opportunity where now I'm doing this full time. And so yes, I'm on the we call it affectionately Darth, which is Digital Arts and Humanities at Harvard.
Awesome. There has to be a lot of Star Wars memes and references, I'm sure.
If you can pull up a 404, I think there will be a Darth Vader
Oh,
reference in there.
seriously? I'm here for it. Yes, page not found. I find your lack of nav disturbing. You know what? I think that is beautiful, and I really think that people should embrace the 404, the fun 404 page. More. Right? There should really be something going on that's like makes it. Something hasn't worked out, but you can make people laugh. But
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I've heard people push back against it. Like if you're on like your medical website and you're maybe about to get bad news, and then you get like a picture of a kitten. Uh,
Dr.
so
Kitten doesn't know where your results went. Like I get that that's not funny. But yeah, I mean most things are not that serious.
yeah.
Mostly. Okay, so what kind of things does Darth do? Like you've described this as kind of a web or tech agency within Harvard. Maybe
Yeah,
more
it is
within the
very
digital arts
much.
group.
So,
Yeah.
Harvard has a gigantic IT group. I don't know how many hundreds of people work, but more than 500 people in IT. We are a small team, and we operate very much like a small agency. So usually, what happens is a faculty member has a funded research project that's going to last for an amount of time, and then we consult with them to build it. And most of the time, I kind of think of these as I kind of have these different categories of these kinds of projects that I think of.
Hmm.
Um, I lost in my notes what I called them, but they are there. You have like one is like a virtual research environment. So the focus
Hmm.
is this is a platform that we're building for the research to be done on. Like the reason the research should be done in like a web app would be because you have access to visualization, to Postgres, to pandas. So we can kind of build up this platform to do the actual research on and some of the data entry.
All right, so like a full-on research application.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I guess you can also kind of see your work through the different stages of research projects and academic research and so on. And we'll get to maybe end of life in a sense
Uh huh.
further down in the conversation. But so this would be we have a grant or we just work here and we're going to work on some form of research. What do you give them? Right. Like, and I think that's a super interesting challenge because one of the real common answers would be Jupyter, Jupyter Lab, Marimo, whatever. But that's still pretty code heavy for people who are possibly philosophers or something.
Oh, exactly. That's why in digital humanities, I won't even maybe I won't even attempt to define it in any narrow sense because I'll get in trouble with somebody. But you have two groups that are interfacing with each other, and one is digital humanities as a field, like as a subfield, all of its own. And these are people who have humanities domain like knowledge and technical skills, and they're bringing them together. And in a lot of cases, the audience for that kind of work is other people working in the digital humanities.
Sure.
But far more common, and this is what we work with, is people who have humanities domain expertise, and they want to publish or do research or share with other people who have that same humanities domain expertise, and they are now interested in adding a technical component to it. how can we
Right.
supercharge what they have?
Maybe just take a moment and speak to maybe I don't know if this venue will actually speak directly to anybody who I was imagining here, but people who work with folks. What would you tell somebody who works with a group who have some technical skill, who could create some of these things that we're going to talk about, but the people who they would create it for don't necessarily think they need it or know that they need it? Like it feel, I've gone often on rants about like how programming is a superpower, not a replacement for your job, right?
Yeah, that's a problem for a lot of people, especially because you might use some new computer tools to supercharge your research, but the article that you publish or the research output of that, the audience, they may not be interested in hearing about that at all. And so
Yeah.
for most people who are working in this space, the tools, you have to use them in such a way that you can talk about the research output without talking about the tool. And we have other venues to talk about the tools themselves, like the Journal for Open Source Software, that you can kind of get some of it out there. But that is that's the significant challenge, is convincing people that it could be useful, and then convincing the audience that they should be interested in kind of the methods behind how some of the new research comes out.
Yeah, also, I think I'm a big believer that presenting stuff in the right order is really, really important. If you present your research and it's beautiful and powerful, and oh, look, we've also, by the way, covered 100 times more data than any prior research. Surprise, I wonder how I did that. And then people are like, this is amazing. Then after you kind of hook them with the inspiration and what's possible, then you're like, let me tell you about the tool. And all of a sudden you're like, that's a cool tool, right? This is not just like geekery, like programmer, Charlie Brown speak, wah, 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 wah. It's like, no, I'm listening. Tell me now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things I think that really opens people's eyes is a really powerful search interface. You have all of this research data, just put it behind Elasticsearch with some really good filtering on it, and all of a sudden you have fast, rapid access to the data in a way you never had before. Like, you were never scrolling through the Excel spreadsheets and finding exactly what you wanted, like you were with this new search interface. And that by itself is like so simple. We're so used to that in web development that like everything needs to have a fantastic search now. But so many people have their data locked behind, a terrible search interface.
Yeah. Yeah, just a few things to sort of expose that. So give us a sense of what these data exploration web apps might look like. These are probably kind of mostly stuck to the inside, kind of internal to the research lab, research team, groups, and so on. These are probably not that public facing, right?
Almost everything we work on does end up having a public facing component. So maybe the research itself is done locked behind a user login that's just for the researchers. But then they expose that research to the public, usually with a good search interface and different pages for exploring their data and visualizations and things like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, everything we do ends up becoming a production public web app in the end.
Yeah. Awesome. And then another one of your categories you put in was virtual research environments, like data entry, publishing,
Yep.
authoring, collaboration. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a good example of this maybe is one of the projects that well, actually the best example of it is the project I worked on during my PhD.
Okay.
It's called Apatosaurus. The short story behind the name is that it sounds like apparatus. In textual criticism, when you are displaying and visualizing variant readings to a base text, that form of visualizing it is a critical apparatus. A critical apparatus is a pretty boring website name, but Apatosaurus, dinosaurs, might make textual criticism sound fun.
Yeah. I do love dinosaurs. No, that's really cool. So this comes out as a web app, and I know you also have you talked about some desktop apps as well.
Yeah, that's right. So so there's this people upload their collation to this, and then they can visualize it and there's a public component of this as well, but really the back end is editing a collation, adding notes to all of the different readings and stuff. So
Yeah.
I could show what the back end looks like, but we can also move on.
Let's move on, just because most people will not totally hear. But just give us a sense of like what do you create for people so that they're like, yeah, I can use this app, right? Like, give us a sense of some of the features, I guess, is what I'm getting to.
Yeah. So another good example is we have a project at Darth at Harvard called Mapping Color in History, and this is a collaboration with a lab. This lab brings in pieces of artwork, and they do like spectral analysis on the pigments, so they can identify like what was used to make a particular color of this red, or what was made to make this color of of blue. And then the idea is tracking how did people make those pigments like over
Right.
time, and specifically in Asian art.
Is this
So
the Dharma Punya one?
no, this is mapping color in history.
Ah,
I don't
yeah,
think it's
yeah.
up here. Sorry about that.
Somewhere. That's all right. I'll find it. Keep talking.
Okay, so the front end is great. The public end. This is people can explore by pigments and then see the images that contain those pigments. Now in the back end, what the researchers will be able to do is correlate exactly which point of a painting the analysis was done on. So they have like this deep zoom image viewer where they'll zoom in and they'll select the point where that was taken from. And so, you know, how else would you do that other than a digital interface to indicate on an image of a painting where that spectral analysis was performed?
Sounds almost like astronomy in a weird way.
Oh yeah,
We zoomed into here and we took a different spectrum of or the painting, and we realized that it's actually identical to this, something crazy like that, right?
yep, yep. Yeah,
Nice.
that's right. Yeah, so it's essentially a pigments, like a pigments database.
Yeah. Wild. So the third category of these digital humanities projects that you put down was like data extraction, transformation. In data science, they often say, 80% of the work is the data wrangling, which is like cleaning, organization, just getting it so you could possibly start asking questions about it. I'm sure you all do a lot of that.
Absolutely. So often, the very beginning of a project might be an Excel sheet or several spreadsheets, and the first task is to ingest these into a proper database. Not so much MongoDB for us. It's going into Postgres.
That's
We're
all
a
good.
Django shop. We're a Django shop, so it's going into Postgres. And yeah, no, that is probably the number one challenge of the early stage is figuring out what the right data model is, what the right relationships are to model the data. Doing that work is advantageous to everybody because it helps both the researchers who brought the data to think about it in a more organized way. I mean, they've been trying to do that, and they have the spreadsheets, but now we're modeling out the data so that we can add it to database tables, and then to use later. So that works out well for everybody. And yeah, absolutely, cleaning the data, getting dates, working with fuzzy dates, being able to parse July of 2020 or summer of 2020, and handling kind of all of those cases so that
Right.
we do get dates in the end. And yeah,
One of the crazy stories from data parsing history is one of I can't remember exactly you talked about biology tools or genetics tools earlier. One of the groups that names genes had to change the name of a gene because it kept getting parsed by Excel into a date. Something
yeah,
like
I remember that. I remember that.
so
That's right.
crazy.
Yes.
So like these are the weird edge cases I'm sure you run into. Like it's not even supposed to be a date. Why is this a date? Like I don't know why it's a date. Help me out here. The code keeps crashing. Like Pandas parsed it as a date and it's not, or whatever.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, usually lots of test suites around that ingest process until we've got it. Now, once we've got it in, usually the research is ongoing, and then we're able to provide them now a new cleaned interface to do the additional data entry as the project is going. And that's usually a win-win for everybody.
Sure. And so this sort of ETL ingestion side of everything is it's like, don't worry, Darth has got it for you. And then we'll provide you like a database connection to start working. Or do you give them the tools and then they kind of iterate on them? And how much is this you and how much is this you providing like CLI tools and stuff or notebooks over to people?
Our the I'd say most of the people that we're working with are aware of the technical tools, but they don't want a database connection. So we are giving them, we're doing the ingest and then building a platform where they can begin interacting with their data.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't want one. Maybe you give them maybe give them an app though, right? With like Elasticsearch and other things that they can.
No, absolutely. Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We give them a web platform to begin exploring, to begin publishing.
So I was thinking that you said you're a Django shop, which is cool. It sounds though to me like describing what you're doing, just imagining how this is. Like you're probably creating these projects often. Like how often does one of these projects actually last, or how many of them do you iterate? You know, I'm trying to get a sense. Like, do you work on stuff for a year, or is it like every 2 weeks we're on a new project?
It's why I think of us as like an agency, because we get to work on greenfield projects fairly often, like you're imagining, which would not be the case normally at a big university IT department. So you know, maybe two or three projects a year, two or three big ones a year, and then we have to put to bed a few a year as well, because these things, they're funded with grant money, and then the grant money runs out and it's time, and then we have to figure out what do we do with it now. We don't want to lose the data and this way of presenting it, but we can't
so
keep
important.
paying for Elasticsearch.
Yeah, of course. We're going to dive into that because that is, but let's save that for the end. It seems like that's the arc of the story of these things. But I certainly think it's something that you don't think about that much, right? Like you said, it was only $100 a month for this, and we got a big grant. There's a bunch of no big deal, but like when the grant's out, who's on the hook for $100 a month and making sure it survives upgrades and all that kind of business.
No, that's right.
Yeah. So my original question when I started down this path was thinking like, how do you get started on these? Do you have like a big framework or a cookie cutter sort of thing or something like this is how we do it because it plugs into all this other automation and tools we built for the last 10 projects? You know, that's kind of a unique position. A lot of companies build one website for themselves and that's their app, or they're an agency that goes across so much variation they can't do that kind of stuff, right?
That's right. That's right. That's a good question. We have things that we reuse. Some of them are open source, different, like search components and things that we maintain that we'll use across projects. And we have tried to do the cookie cutter Django project. The truth is, each project is different enough.
Yeah.
Really, we like to evaluate it from first principles as we're evaluating it and thinking, what is the best technology to use? So we don't have a cookie cutter. We don't have a kind of a meta framework for bootstrapping them because they're sufficiently different from each other that we.
I find that too. The idea of how we could just grab this cookie cutter or copier. Are you familiar with copier? People out there might be familiar with that. It's like, it's a little bit like cookie cutter with the bonus that you can update it later if you change your mind about something, like actually change this project to use Postgres rather than SQLite or something, which is pretty cool. But every time I try to work with one of those projects, even ones that I've created for myself, I'm not hating on anyone. I'm like, it's like 75% awesome and 25% I just got to take this stuff out. I'll just do it from scratch. It's not, how hard is this? I'll just create a few folders and put a few things in there, and I'll copy the one, like the pyproject.tom, or like the one thing there's like, how do I do this again? I'll just copy that and we're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I find. I find it seems like a really brilliant idea, but in practice, it hasn't saved us time yet.
No, I mean, maybe it's a case study. Like, okay, let's see what they're doing for this one. Oh, that is interesting how they're integrating this other thing, maybe, but as a true foundation, I find it in theory awesome. In practice, I end up not doing it for various reasons. Don't know why. I'm going to save this for later because what the question I'm about to ask you is going to send us just down a rat hole. So instead, before we go down the rat hole, maybe we could, not that one, maybe we could talk about, I mean, you talked about some, but let's maybe just feature some of the projects that are maybe more well known that you guys have done.
Sure. Yeah, good. So, yeah, one of them is called the Amendments Project. And this is, I didn't know this until I started working on this project, that there have been thousands of, I think it's at least 22,000 proposed amendments to the United States Constitution that never went anywhere. And so kind of the goal of this project is to show that there have been lots of attempts to amend the Constitution, but actually the Constitution is frozen. I mean, it's not actually amendable anymore, at least not in the politics of any time recently.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is a database.
I cannot imagine a situation where the U.S. Constitution gets amended. It has to be unanimous across all the states, right? Is that right? If I can't remember, but it's been a long time.
I don't remember off the top of my head if it has to be unanimous, but it certainly has to be. It has to
it's got to be
party lines.
Yeah, it's got to be pretty darn close. If it's not, it all in. Yeah, it's like, time travel or the speed of travel the speed of light could be theoretically possible. Probably not going to happen.
No, it's hard to see. Yeah.
So
this is from a historian, at Harvard.
Interesting. Okay.
And so it's a database of all of, and the full text from all of these amendments, and it's from the public's point of view, it's a Postgres full text vector search interface for finding and filtering through on all of the different amendments that have been proposed.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's see. I love it. Yeah, this is a nice looking site.
We work with a designer, and she's very
okay. Good. Yeah. Of course, like an agency would, right?
Yep.
Nice. So we'll get a really pretty rich search interface, and then off you go. I have no idea even what I would search for. But
yeah, well, you can always search for something religious, something abortion related. There's going to be lots of things there.
I thought all those also like guns, but like I don't want to go down. I'm not sure I even want to go down that route. Awesome though. This looks super useful. Maybe someday we'll have a functional government again. We'll see. Let's change it, or maybe we'll go down and it's folklore. Like, look, it used to work.
All right. So another really great project, at least from a content point of view, that's interesting. The research that it's doing is the Finn folklore database, which in Celtic storytelling, moms have been telling stories to daughters, and people have been telling stories for a very long time, hundreds or 1,000 years, about Finn McCummel, who is a hero from Irish mythology. Some of it based in historical events, but it goes back so far. So there's many hundreds or thousands of these stories that have been spread, and versions of these stories that have been told. And so some of them are audio recordings where somebody, like some researcher has gone out to an island off the coast of Scotland and recorded somebody telling, their version of the hero of Finn and his band of heroes. They defend Scotland and Ireland from invaders and attackers. Very exciting stories and stuff, and a team of characters. So there's audio recordings, and then there's documents, like written documents that contain these. And so this is a database of kind of all of those all in one place, with for the on the public side a nice search interface for um, discovering them. Either
Yeah.
using the map view, or searching.
Yeah, that's cool. I got my map view for some random thing I searched about here. Amazing. Yeah, but this is pretty interesting. All these different tellings and stuff.
Oh, and yeah, one of the big challenges with this project is that it's fully internationalized. So it's available in
Ah,
English. Like everything is available in English, Scottish Gaelic, and Irish Gaelic, but that extends into the database. So usually people have multiple names recorded for them. And so yeah, you might have one person with any number of names in different languages, sometimes more than one Scottish name, that kind of thing. And so the data model on this one is quite messy, um, but sensible. But yeah,
okay.
it's quite a lot of different kinds of data to wrangle, and then with all of the translations for each thing.
Yeah, that's wild. It's not just we need the user interface of this thing to translate, about. No, it's way more,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It is that. It is that. And then it is also, yes, all of the items in the database have a translation, or can.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how that makes a lot of sense. You want to work in the native language of the people who did that part of the folklore or whatever, right?
Yeah. Well, and people are still speaking those languages. So people who would use this to,
Sure.
like somebody may have heard a story from their mom or dad, and are now would like to find other versions of that story. And they live in
Okay.
a part of Scotland where they speak Scottish Gaelic as their first language.
Right, right.
They,
Very
they can
cool.
still access the site.
Yeah. And then that mapping color history one, that's another of the public ones that you said is pretty major.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pigments database. You can uh, uh, search by either English color names like blue, and find all of these Asian paintings that have blue, or a particular kind of pigment of how they made the blue.
Yeah. Nice. So what's the open source story? You're creating all these apps, maybe some of these frameworks. There's got to be some tools. Like, is there a big desire or already an effort to have a lot of these things open source, or is it too niche, or is it just like this is the advantage of Harvard has is other universities don't get this?
No, it's something we talk about quite a bit. Usually these things start closed source during development, and then we work with the faculty, and we talk about how we can take, like the repo for the web app, how we can take that public. And so we've done that for a number of projects. Not all of them are, but the ideal is that they all make their way into the open, and especially when they become archived.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good way to help them live on. And, they might even go into GitHub's Arctic Vault, which is crazy. I don't know if people know about that out there, but GitHub has quite a while ago started taking copies of all of the repos and putting them, backing them up and storing them in the Arctic Vault. It's kind of cool. I really, really, really hope we never need that, but it's kind of neat.
Yeah, me too. Usually universities have their own archival system, so any important research data is usually in at part of that system as well.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, right? Like, I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere. I think it was South Korea or Taiwan, where like 7 years of government data got lost or something like that. It was really, really bad recently. There was a fire, and I think they had backups, but maybe just into the building. Like we'll put that out. We'll back it up to the hard drive over here. Not good.
No.
Not good. You definitely want this stuff to survive. I mean, academia has this history of like tomes that have survived the past and really, really long-lived information, right? Besides the Library of Alexandria or something like that, maybe.
That's what we want. That's what we want. We want it to, we want it to last.
Absolutely. So maybe that's a good time to sort of talk about the trailing end. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on here. Just like you've run out of money, not because you actually run out of money. The grant is done and you've either spent or given back or whatever with the remaining little bits of money. It's always a weird balance with research. It's like, oh, we got $3,000 left on this research grant. What are we going to do with it? It's not like, oh, we're going to give it back. We just didn't need it. It's like, we're going to find a way to like fund a student to do a little more work or whatever. But eventually the grant is over. Then
That's
what?
right.
You've got some
That's
expensive
right.
app, access to a big database because it need a big search or a lot of compute or something.
That's right. Everything during like, I mean, anything that's a Django app, we deploy to AWS using containers, which isn't the cheapest way to host anything, but that's for the most part the Harvard way, and it is robust and is reliable, and we don't have like a DevOps person on call on the weekend to like to rescue one of these apps. So having them reliable is good. Okay, so it's on AWS and paying for the containers, paying for that Elasticsearch cluster, the RDS Postgres database. Okay, well, even if somebody wants to start paying for that out of pocket, all of those little services, they add up to enough that we need to do something when the project hits end of life. And so our gold standard that we've developed so far is asking, can this become a static website? Can we bake this out into all HTML files and acknowledge that that there will be some trade-offs? We will trade off some searching. It's not going to have Elasticsearch. It doesn't mean that it won't have any search though. So we'll trade out Elasticsearch, and it'll be very difficult to add new data. But that's okay because it's being archived. So can we get it into a static site? And that's challenging depending on how you've set it up. So we now have projects where we set them up from the beginning to be archivable like this. And one of them is it's called Water Stories, and it was a companion to an art installation at the Radcliffe Institute on the Harvard campus. And so this was this live site during the duration of the art installation where people could come in and add stories that they had about water onto an iPad. And then those went up to our database. We built that with something called Django Bakery, which if you opt in and you use all of their class-based views the way that they're meant to be used, then you can bake this out into static files when you're done. Very low effort. That was perfect.
That is such a cool idea, and mad props to them for ASCII art logos. Come on now. I feel like that should be in the view source if it's not. But this is such a cool idea because you can just take a working site. You guys are a Django shop, so a lot of your sites are written in Django, and you just go make it static, right? More
Essentially,
or less.
yes. And what's really great about it is if they wanted to make a change, and they have asked since we made it static, they've asked for a couple changes. So locally, I just Docker compose up this whole application, make the change in the Django admin, and rebake the site. And
yeah,
so
that's cool.
It can still be updated.
Something, if you've never tried this, like something like, hey, can we just add one more menu item? And you're like, no, we're not adding the menu item because you know what that means?
Exactly.
That means we're changing 7,300 pages because they all bake in the whole HTML, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But if that's in my Django database in my SQLite file,
Yes.
then no problem at all, because then I just
Bingo.
rebake it. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. So I think this is super neat. There's also frozen Flask. If I could get rid of all the ads, I do not need a Yeti thing, whatever that is. The glass, not the mythical thing. But Frozen Flask, which does a similar thing,
Hmm,
but for Flask apps, if
that's
you're a
cool.
Flask person, probably would work with Quart. Don't know for sure, but probably. So that's a pretty interesting idea as well. Throw that in there. But also, what else? Also, you talked about search, right? That
Hmm.
can be such a problem. And I'm a huge fan of your recommendation here with PageFind. Tell us
Yeah.
about PageFind.
So this has been, I think it's been a bit of a game changer in how functional one of these archived sites can remain. So we're
Yes.
actually in the process of that amendments website that searches across 22,000 full texts of amendments. We are in the process of sunsetting that, and that will become a static site. And that's for that search. We already have an internal demo that proves that we can replace that Postgres full search with PageFind. You lose vector search.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of got to get like really true keyword matching.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. But you still get filtering. I mean, and really faceting and filtering is when it comes to discovery of things. That's I mean I find that's really what's useful. So filtering these amendments by state or by the Congress that was active at the time, or by the person who who co-wrote it. All of
Yeah.
those are totally great in PageFind, and the keyword search is just fine in PageFind. One of the things I really like about it is that it takes your index and it chops it up into lots of little files that can just fly across the network. So it's a very fast search. It's not a huge network load, even if your index is initially very large, and it essentially cuts it up somewhat alphabetically. So if your search starts with T, or I should say a better word for audio. If it starts with W, then
Yeah.
it will load up the index for words that start with W and fly that over the network instead of the whole thing. So it's pretty slick, and it has a great Python API. So to do the proof of concept for the amendments search, I just took a database dump and then manually indexed with a Python script into PageFind.
Wait, there's a Python API for PageFind?
Yeah, so the way PageFind works, I should have said that, is the way
Oh,
most people will use it is by normally PageFind consumes HTML, so you give it
yeah.
access to your dist
Oh.
folder,
Oh, okay.
and then it crawls through all of your HTML files, and you can do great things like adding little HTML tags that are just for PageFind that give it the filtering ability, or
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you want
yeah.
to sort by something, and so that's great. But or you can just call PageFind from Python or from TypeScript, and just build that index manually.
Well, thanks a lot, David. Now I have another thing I got to go research. Now this is awesome. I'm a huge fan of PageFind, as I said on my personal website, mkenny.codes. Is just a pure static. It starts in Markdown and it ends up in HTML. But if you add PageFind in, you get a super rich. If you want to just know, you want to talk about like what was about Docker, it shows you really nice results, pulling out the different parts of the page and sections that talk about it, like the headers and then what is said, and it even does like subword. Like if you just type doc, it finds all the
Yep.
words that match that. And what I really like about it is a couple things. Is it's instant. It basically is like nearly instant. If you type a few things, it gets way faster because it's pulling down. And if you go and look in the network console here and you type something, you can see that it's actually pulling in these little tiny fragments, which this one's coming off disk cache in 3 milliseconds, right? But it breaks your index into a bunch of very small page find fragments that I think it's like it starts with anything that starts with the word do. These are all the pre-built results and stuff like that, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. One of our open source projects that we maintain is a Vue.js component library for PageFind, so that we can style it and reuse it across different projects.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Yeah, I think this really unlocks it. I mean, you go to so many sites, like their documentation or just their web app, and the search is so bad. You type something and it's like thinking, spinning, 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 and then like 5 seconds later, it gives you kind of janky results. And if you just like throw PageFind in there, it's you can't type fast enough to outrun the results. You know what I mean?
No, that's right. Yeah, too many static site search solutions. They use like a JSON blob that you have to pull down and then iterate through.
You know what's worse, and I see this a lot, would be if you go to google.com and then you would say effectively site colon whatever, and then you search Docker, right? They basically pull that,
Yeah.
they just say search this and you just get Google results for your site. And obviously Google's fine, but it's just,
No, I find that unusable. Really.
I do too. It really, you're like, oh, geez. But now I'm super excited to realize I can do that from my dynamic content as well. So with
Yeah,
the
absolutely, you
Python
can.
integration. Okay. Nice. What about like something truly static? Have you looked at like Hugo and some of the other type of things?
Sure. So when I see you've even got the tab up for the SUMEB project, which is that's essentially a database of many specimens taken from the SUMEB mine.
Okay.
So
Looks
in
beautiful.
the oh, it is. Yeah, it is. So if you click on minerals database, you open up that search interface, and that's powered by PageFind.
Oh, this is?
Yes. I forget what I
Wow.
was.
I see. You
Which
guys,
question I
you've
was
even
answering.
like hooked into, I was thinking just like pure static, like Hugo, like,
Oh yes, yes. So yeah, yes. So this is an Astro site. So for this
okay,
website, we have this as an Astro site, so that we have a little because with Astro they make it so easy to pull in like Vue components.
I see.
So like our page find is a custom Vue.js component library. With Astro, you can use React components, you can use Vue components, but what it does is it's just a static site generator.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. So a little bit more designable than like Hugo, where it's like, and here's your markdown file. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I love Hugo though. Yeah, I use Hugo for different personal sites here and there, and it's just so fast and easy to get up and running. But
Yeah,
it's
I do
great,
too.
great when it's a
That's
good
what my
fit.
website's written in. It's in Hugo. But though if I'm integrating with anything else, I used to kind of like split it up. Like this part's Hugo and this part's like a Python app, and it's pretty easy to get something that will take a bunch of markdown files and just turn them into HTML and just put a page template around that. So I've kind of stepped away from mixing and matching that as much as I used to. So now if I got a static section of a dynamic site, but that has nothing to do with the archival side of
Hmm.
things, right? Because the idea is that the thing that I'm describing is gone on purpose.
That's right.
Okay. So you've got we've got Django Bakery. I threw out Frozen Flask, and I'm sure there's a ton more that neither of us are aware of at
Yeah,
the moment.
so Janko Bakery was really good for that purpose, and we're keeping our eyes open for projects that it's a good fit for. But that was a pretty simple website. It needed a dynamic backend, but it was quite straightforward. And for Django Bakery, you have to opt into inheriting from their class-based
I
views.
see. So
So if
you
you're
got
doing,
to
for
think
example,
ahead of it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, hard to add retroactively, probably impossible. Now, our other websites, like the Fin example and the mapping color example, those are APIs. That's a Django API, Django REST framework for one, GraphQL for the other. One has a Vue front end, one has a React front end. Okay, well, Django Bakery just isn't gonna work very well for like serializing JSON
Yeah, it's like
responses.
awesome. Here's your unrendered JavaScript front end code, and it's just going to look empty or something.
Yeah, so it is a good reason to consider using like vanilla Django templates when possible, like for that
Yeah,
reason. But those were inherited from the vendors, those two sites, and we made a lot of progress on those. So you know what what to do in that, like in that situation. Django Bakery isn't an option, uh, and those projects are not end of life yet. So we have some time, but what we're doing is strategizing. Okay, how will we rescue them? How will we keep them alive once somebody needs to stop paying for hosting? And
yeah,
we
yeah.
have ideas. We have I think there's clever, interesting things out there. We'll have to keep looking into it.
You know, there are some pretty interesting ideas. I know that you had been thinking about them. Like, what if instead of having a backend that ran in a container, you could just have WebAssembly, but still have it go right, just sort of a local loopback type of thing.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this one because it enables the essentially the full functionality of the live site to exist as what is just a static site. So because of Pyodide
Yep.
and projects like PyScript, we can run Python in the browser, and we can run SQLite in the browser, and you can
Mm-hmm.
now we can even run Postgres in the browser with PG Lite. So if we can run all those things in the browser, then couldn't we have Django hosted right in the browser? And you
Right.
can. You can. So there's a proof of concept that proves it's possible, called Django WebAssembly. And if you load up this if you load this up, it'll let you log in to the Django admin, and you're not logging into anybody's backend. You're logging into your own browser where this is running in a service worker.
Awesome. Look at that. Oh, hold on. It told me what the password was. Very secure. Matt? Password.
Well, it can be entirely
Do not
insecure
save that.
because yeah, it's running right in your own browser.
Yeah, that's awesome. And here we are, Django admin. Incredible.
Yeah, so I'm
So,
pretty interested in this.
mhm.
You've got to convert an RDS Postgres database into either SQLite or something like PG Lite, but I think that's all doable. So I think it's an
Well,
exciting possibility.
yeah, for sure. I do think so. Maybe you have a rich query system that you're powering by your database that's really heavy,
Exactly.
and it's got a bunch of data that's like, here's all of our working data that you might ask questions about. Maybe you just convert that to page find to help you find the pieces, and then just keep the operational data, and maybe like even a SQLite with like the Django ORM. You can just switch the connection, keep talking to it. I mean, there's possibilities to just get something not too terrible that's not the same but not that far off.
Yeah, exactly. And then it goes on GitHub pages, and it can live hopefully forever. I mean, it feels like GitHub will last forever, but it'll last longer than funding will, anyways.
It's definitely it's definitely going to last longer than just something that we can't pay for anymore, right? Like, I don't know how long GitHub's going to be around for. I think a while, but you never know, right? It seems like stuff's going to last forever. Then it gets changed. We had Subversion. Now it's completely gone, right? Just 20 years, 15 years later, but still, I think 100% there.
Yep. But if somebody can, if something ever happened, somebody just needs to copy that folder of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files and dump it into an S3 bucket or somewhere else, and then it can continue living there. So
Yeah.
it's a good option.
It's a great option. It's a really, really good option. I mean, I guess one of the long-term concerns might be, what if the WebAssembly standard changes so much that it's not supported anymore? But you could probably byte-wise convert it if you had to. Like somebody would probably be able to create one.
Yeah, that would be unfortunate. So I suppose if that happens, I mean, if that happens, yeah, we're booting up one of these projects is like booting up an emulator for some old DOS game.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I guess let's think about this for a second. Somebody got, gosh, what was the chain? This is the whole JavaScript, the PyCon talk, where got like Firefox compiled into not WASM, into ASM JS or something like that. So it was run like Chrome was running Firefox, which was running, I think, Doom, which was also ASM JS. If we can do that, we could get something that would run, that would read old WebAssembly into new WebAssembly, if it really mattered to the world. It'd be kind of
Absolutely.
wild. Yeah.
Especially if it's in a public repo that people who care about the data can rescue it somehow.
Yeah. What about like a virtual machine?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
could have saved me some. Take a snapshot of Ubuntu, LTS some version, and just what are we going to do?
Everything we do is Dockerized. Everything is in a
Yeah.
container. So in the worst case scenario, we could give somebody the image, and they could run it if they have Docker. I think that's a nice peace of mind to know that no matter what, something will be able to run this container. And even in I don't know if you've used GitHub, what's it called, Code Spaces.
Yeah.
I archived one project. It was kind of dramatic and sudden that it needed to be archived. So without much time to do anything, and it was a Ruby on Rails project, and I'm not a Rails developer, but I was able to get it archived in a way that anybody could, with one command, go to the repo on GitHub and boot it up in Code Spaces, and then have it live,
Yeah.
running from their code space. And so that works too.
Very cool. I think as WebAssembly grows, there'll be more possibilities for these types of things. Yeah, amazing. I'm pretty excited about PageFind having a Python API. I didn't realize that, so I'm going to be doing something with that for sure. So what else? What else? Let me ask you one more thing before I kind of let you wrap up with some final thoughts here. What about AI?
Oh, that's a good question. So AI, I mean, there's like, in my story, there's like one interesting part of AI, which is that I got started and self learned everything I needed to about software development to begin doing this right before ChatGPT really came on and was able to do real programming.
Yeah, you had like 4 years of legit programming before.
Right. So I think,
Yeah.
I mean, so I was thinking when I was thinking about how I got into it, I thought, what if I was 4 years later, starting my PhD and wanting to do these tools? I would have been able to accomplish what I needed to for my research without acquiring the technical skills.
I know.
And that would
I
have
don't know
been-
that's a good thing. I'm not sure if that's
Right,
a good or bad thing. It could be both.
I would have thought it was a good thing. I would have thought it's a good thing, but in my hands now, like software engineer, AI is more powerful in my hands now than it would have been then. So
Yeah,
I can
even the
I
same
can
model,
make
same
it
everything,
work
yeah.
for me. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
make it work for me in a way that I couldn't have been able to then. So I'm thankful for that, but it's something I think of. I don't want to say it's necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely marks a difference in time between other people who are maybe wanting to get into digital humanities. They're humanities researchers. They want to add some digital tools. I think this will probably knock people off of the more technical path because it's not.
I think it will too, and I think that might be a negative. When you were telling me your story originally, I was thinking kind of like, how neat is it that you didn't sign up for, and the people you were working with probably didn't intend to sign you up for learning true software development. But look at this cool and interesting job that you now have that you never would have imagined. I'm sure when you signed up for your PhD, like, you know what I'm going to do when I get my PhD? I'm going to go X, Y, like, I'm going to join the Darth program. Like, no, probably not, right? But here you are. And I think that's actually a really interesting knock-on effect for a lot of researchers and people in grad school is they're kind of put into this programming adjacent type of thing. And a lot of folks sort of are like, actually, that's pretty interesting. I'm going to kind of lean into that. And I think AI might not like you said, knock people off that path to some degree.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's just like one part of the AI story. The other one is that like how we use it. Um, it's great for data extraction, pulling data
Yeah,
um, out of different to make these search interfaces more powerful, to extract different data from them. That's just one example where it's been handy. We're looking for ways that it can really empower faculty. We're still very much in the exploration phase of
yeah,
like how we can use it and provide it to faculty as a like digital humanities tool.
sure. I was thinking pretty much when I asked the question of it, it's just like two parts. Like, one, how does it? Are you guys using it to help take project? Well, that would have been a month. No, actually, it's 3 days. You know what I mean? That, and then if people are asking, a professor comes along and says, and we want our own custom AI thing, or we're using Harvard's internal one that we're allowed to use, but we won't be able to use it once the grant runs out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think one good example of this type of thing is that what we're starting to get is faculty who are vibe coding, and
Oh
now
gosh.
and we are
Okay.
going to teach them. We're going to teach them how to do it.
Yeah.
Instead
It
of
is a
having
skill.
them, yeah,
It's an
no,
absolutely a skill.
yeah, no, it is, it is. Instead of copy and pasting from ChatGPT into VS Code, having them learn Copilot, maybe even having them download Cursor, download some
Yeah.
real dedicated tools to get this done to make them more productive. So, yeah, educating about how to do it is one thing. You asked if we're using it. We have access to Copilot, and that's great. Um, I can't say that we've shipped anything in 3 days instead of a month yet, but
Yeah.
one anecdote is that right now I'm doing some really interesting processing of music audio files, and somebody asked to have a beatboxer if I could chop that file up so that all of the individual sounds that the beatboxer makes are identified in a file. And so
Okay.
so I'm using some music libraries, so a Python library called Librosa. There's some complicated math in there. It's a little bit too much for me. It's no problem for Claude. Claude knows how to do that math, and I use my expertise to string it together to get a good output.
Yeah. Awesome. You got time for one more quick question before we clap things
For
up?
sure.
Raymond out there, Raymond Yees asks, it says, it'd be good to hear how Harvard uses containers on AWS and its reliability. It's reliable, not cheapest way to host things. Are you thinking about moving that, or is it not that much, not that
Okay,
big of an
I'll tell you
expense?
about a failed experiment. Um, we were using ECS, and we're still using ECS. So that's AWS's main. It's not Kubernetes, but it's one step down with their horizontal scaling container clusters. And I wanted to move us onto a single EC2 instance because our projects are popular, but they're not so popular that we actually have to worry about horizontal scaling.
Right. It's not like it's front page in New York Times. I guess it probably could be, but even so, for the static sites, they probably still could take it.
Yeah, so I priced it out and I got an example deployed, an example project deployed, and was able to confirm that it would indeed be much cheaper. And it was deployed in a similar way using AWS CDK. So it's all infrastructure as code all the way down. But it turns out there's all kinds of compliance when you are in charge of the VM at like a big university, or I'm sure any corporate setting. If you are in charge of the VM and the OS on it, then you have to know that you have the latest patches in. You have to know that you have latest Ubuntu. And then there's other things, different observability things that you have to have in place, that are not usually required if you're running in a container cluster like ECS.
I see.
So it ends up being a lot less work and a much easier to achieve compliance. if we run containers or some other serverless thing. If I run
Right.
all my personal projects, they all run in a single virtual machine, but um,
Sure.
we're running in containers. Yeah,
Yeah. And you've got all the SOC 2 stuff and all those different things, right? Like there's layers.
yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, very cool. Final thoughts. You want to talk to people
Well,
who are maybe doing similar? Oh, go ahead. If you've got something more to add
yeah,
before you quit.
yeah. I mean, I'll mention that. But what I didn't say is that in that 2019, when I started learning Python, I discovered Talk Python almost immediately. And one of the first episodes that I listened to was the other digital humanities
The
episode,
one
which
with
was also about.
Cornelius Van Lit. He was an
That's right.
awesome guest. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and I thought that was great, and that was also a bit about manuscripts, a little bit more on the image side than the text side, and um, I didn't understand everything that everybody was saying, but I kept tuning in, and I think because of that, because Talk Python was like this, I've been remote working for most of my time, and Talk Python has been kind of like that conversation with the open source community that's been always in my ear, and I think that made a difference, making me feel like I understood the software landscape and like the developer culture and what was going on, and then the different Python libraries and what was possible. So to people who are interested in taking things in a more technical direction, I think it's helpful just to find a few things like that that give you an insight into that world. And the more you listen to it, the more you start to hear the same acronyms and the same
Yeah.
things said enough that you start to feel like, okay, now you're part of the club.
I really appreciate that. That's cool. I've certainly had people reach out to me and say things that at first didn't make any sense to me. Like, I've been listening for 6 weeks now, and it's starting to make sense what you're talking about. Like, why have you been listening for 6 months when it made no sense? That's insane. But a lot of people use listening to the podcast, mine and others, as language immersion, right? Like I could get Duolingo and I could learn Portuguese, or I could move to Brazil for a month. You know what I mean? I bet I would
Yeah,
really learn it.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. No, I think there's truth to that. And some of the things I did was search through search the word deployment, because I'm trying to get my head around how to deploy for the first time, and I just want to hear people talk about it. Like I could read about it, I could read the tutorial, but I just want to hear people talk about deployment to get a sense of what
Yeah.
actual deployment sounds like.
There's something really different when you're learning or trying, even you're maybe an experienced programmer, but not in this particular area, to hear a human side of it and not just the docs, not a sterile, these are the 4 steps, but like a human.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I mean, it's probably why I created the show. It's because I didn't hear those stories. We got to tell those stories. Awesome. I appreciate that. So super cool. All right. So if other people are listening, maybe one of your pieces of advice is keep listening. You'll get there.
Yeah, and if anybody's is like in the humanities and somehow found their way onto this episode with no technical experience, I just would give the caution of or like the anecdote that if AI coding had been around the way it is now when I was learning, I wouldn't be doing digital humanities at Harvard. I wouldn't have been able to get into this field. I wouldn't have known about it. So I guess just think about that when you're learning and applying new tools.
I don't really know what the right fix for that is. That's a very challenging problem. I mean, you can say, I'm just literally not going to fire it up. But I mean, we used to hunt through Stack Overflow and the web and over. And if you're really stuck or you really don't understand, like they're good at explaining stuff too. You just got to really stay in a learner's mindset, not just press the easy button and make this thing and move on.
Yeah,
Easier said than done. Easier said than done.
no, that's true.
So yeah, I want to leave this with kind of a thought about like how much things like Python and these tools and technology can really empower stuff that you wouldn't think is even related, like understanding old manuscripts and how painting is connected or changed over time and stuff, right? Those sound very much disjointed from tech and software, but they really are superpowers that you can bring to your work, whatever your industry is. I know, or field of study. I know there's some sociologists out in the audience, and I'm sure others as well. All right, final thoughts, David. Close it out.
I know that's it.
That's it.
I
All
mean,
right.
you said it great. I mean, just applying these technical tools to old questions, that is the core of digital humanities.
Awesome. Yeah, when I first started hearing about this, I thought I really don't know how this ties together. And after seeing it a few times, I definitely see the power of it. And I thank you for your time coming on. Thank you for sharing your look inside of your team and inside of a small piece of Harvard. I really like these kinds of episodes because it's hard to see this from the outside, right? Like you just see the results, but you don't see like the inner workings of the team and the motivation and stuff. So thank you so much for being here, and yeah.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.